What's up, guys? Hey, Austin. I always get a response from Austin. I appreciate that. Can we get the slideshow up there? If some of you weren't able to come, he would probably not brag on himself, so I'm going to do it now. Last Friday, paintball. The final match of paintball. Ben DeRuggiero, your headmaster. I mean, he got a promotion. Your head prefect. He was outnumbered 5-1. Okay. 5-1. Everybody, all the rest of us had been lit up with various paint. Ben Ruggiero's back in the back, 5 guys, and just turns on his inner Navy SEAL and slowly begins working up the field, wiping people out, using cover, not taking risks that he doesn't have to. And he gets to this moment where there are like 2 guys left and just him, and he looks at us, we're on the sidelines, and like random people are chanting his name at this point. And he looks at us and he's like, "Oh, we have 4 more shots." And so at that point in paintball, the best thing you can do, right, is you have to fire off those 4 and then charge and yell at them to surrender and hope they do before they shoot you, like Tom Pryor did to me. But, no, he was out. You were out. Okay. So he fires off those 4 more shots, and then it was like, God was like, "Ben, this is your game." Because he fired those 4 shots, and there on the ground, and Mac is like yelling out, "Ben, there!" Someone had left a fully loaded paintball gun right there. So the moment was like, Ben is working out, he's like, "I only got 4 more shots." And then, okay, it takes out the next 2 guys, and the crowd goes wild. And I just feel like you guys need to know that about Ben. If we're ever in danger, give Ben the gun. All right. Okay, have any of you ever seen this painting before? Anybody? This is actually at the Met. Any guesses as to who this is? Any guts out there? Gutsy people? I hear a lot of muttering. It's Beyonce. Nope. So this is Joan of Arc. I love this painting. It's at the Met. I don't think I've ever had a painting strike me as much as I haven't had a lot of experience looking at paintings. And this was the one I'm walking through the Met and saw it and just like, whoa. And stunned by it and kind of the realism of it, and was stunned by it before I even saw the title. And then we had like lunch. This was on the ISP trip, and I just immediately after lunch made a beeline straight to this painting to stand in front of it for a while. And I think what I like about it is, so she is doing something fairly mundane. She's like got this deal over here. She's doing her work, and it's like her calling. If you know the story of Joan of Arc, she's been like summoned to do something great. And I don't know if you can see, but they're actually in the background. There are some like angels back there. There are 3. There's like a guy to the right, a woman, and then someone else with their head in their hands, maybe mourning the fact that this calling is going to end in her death. But her face and just the realism of it, and like even, you can't really see it, but her toes are like feeling the dirt. And it's just such a beautiful painting of like this kind of, there's this moment when she's called out of kind of just her day-to-day existence, and she hears something transcendent, like moving her onward. Love that painting. And I see it kind of as a metaphor for like this new order that I want to talk about today, this kind of calling to this higher order. But before I do that, I wanted to talk about the old order. New Order is also a pretty good 80s band, if you're into that kind of thing. So, anybody know what this is? Tower of Babel, nice, good, yeah. All right, so this is the Tower of Babel, and Augustine, back in the day, said there were kind of these 2 things. He called City of God, City of Man. And in the beginning of Genesis, you have this story where these guys all come together and they're like, you know what, we don't need God, and to prove how awesome we are, we're going to build this really, really big tower apart from God that's going to say, like, people are going to be able to look and say, yeah, we're awesome. We kind of have that impulse too today. I don't know, have any of you heard of I keep asking these questions. I'll just tell you. Recently, there was this article in the New Yorker about Silicon Valley immortalists. So there are these people in Silicon Valley who believe that they can cure death. They've been working on it for a while. And if you hear them talk about it, they're like, dude, if people are like iPhones, we just need to make an app that makes death not happen. And literally that's how they talk about it. We're gonna make death optional. And the biologists keep wanting to go like, your body's way more complicated than a phone, this is gonna be really hard. But there's a way in which I feel like, as I was reading that article, it's kind of like a modern Tower of Babel. Like, we're gonna do something that's awesome, that's gonna show that we are great, and we don't need God, and we've got it. And this is the city of man, according to Augustine. Button. The city of man kind of functions on the idea that this is all there is. This is all there is. And so it has some kind of its own rules. For the Silicon Valley immortalists, somebody said, you know what they're really trying to do, why they're trying to expand their life? They're not actually trying to expand their life because they're like, I want to live longer so I can serve people. They're trying to expand their life because they have so much money that they think it's unfair that they only have the same amount of life as everyone else to spend it. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, wait, I have billions of dollars, but I still only get 70 years to spend it all? Why I should have more time to spend all my money, right? So for them, this is all there is. So of course they would be pouring money into make me eternal projects, right? Ted Williams, one of the greatest baseball hitters of all time, is still frozen somewhere because in his will he asked that he be frozen in case we came up with the technology to resurrect Ted Williams. I wonder if he'll still be a 400 hitter. I don't know. But I want to look at a couple of the rules of City of Man. So I would say the two rules kind of City of Man, not everybody operates this way, but when you say this is all there is, I would say, if you say this is all there is, you're going to say, take care of number one is the first thing. And the second thing is love your friends and hate your enemies. So utility and reciprocity, okay? So what do I mean by utility? I mean, you're just going to use things to get an end. By reciprocity, I mean, you dish something, someone dishes out something to you, you pay them back, right? So I want to talk about utility first. So utility says, and think about Stony Brook in general. Stony Brook, incredibly diverse place, right? And it's awesome in that way. But utility says, like, Stony Brook is really just, this experience of being all together is really just red tape. And I'm just going to do what it takes to get to the next level. And the next level, for a lot of you, is actually like, you're like, I get now that I'm in this place where I have to interact with all these people who aren't like me. And I'm willing to do it right now and be polite because I know the end game is I'm going to make lots of money and retreat into my tribe. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are some of you, I think, who probably feel like, I don't really want to be nice to fill-in-the-blank ethnic group or to this gender, but eventually, I'll do it now because this is what I have to do. And it'll be okay, because when I get to college, I can finally start hanging out only with the people I want to hang out with, right? And then that can even go on further, so when I go to grad school, I'm only hanging out with a certain group of people. And then finally, when I've arrived and made all this money, I can go into the suburbs and get a house where I'm only surrounded by upper class versions of myself, right? I think some of us have that deal we've made with ourselves deep down. So it's like, I'll be nice here, but thank God this isn't forever, right? Like, I don't want to hang out with these people forever. So it's a kind of a red tape utility, and I think we have lots of different tribes, yeah? Like, we have our tribes based on our political sentiments, we have our tribes based on our theological sentiments, we have our tribes based on class level. In total honesty, I felt a lot of tribal kind of connection growing up to like the middle lower class, because that's just what I grew up in, and there was a really kind of richer town nearby, and we all had like a real grudge against that thing and looked down on them, and they looked down on us, and that's bad, right? I had developed like a tribe that I felt really involved in. I only wanted to hang out with my tribe. I didn't want to push myself to hang out with other people to get to know them. I could be polite, but I don't really want to know you, you know? And maybe you feel this way about teachers as well, right? Like, I wouldn't normally ever want to talk to this teacher, but I'll be polite to them now because they give me a degree at the end of the day, right? So I think in the city of man, when we're thinking about utility and I'm just using things to get what I want, this is one of the things that is going to happen. The other thing that's going to happen as we view kind of the world as like, I'm just doing this thing so I can get to the next step, and this one's pretty dangerous, but I think you're going to run into kind of gender wars, Mr. and Ms. Smith. So with gender wars, what I mean is too, is that it's going to be possible that as you view the world as like, I'm just getting this to get to this thing, and kind of everybody relates to me in a way that like, I'll be nice if they're nice to me, I'll hate if they hate me, I'll use this if it benefits me, I'll do this if it benefits me, etc., etc. It's dangerous to view the other gender in that way as well. I've been talking about this a little bit in my faith and culture class. It's dangerous to view the other gender in this way as well, as like, I'm just going to use them for whatever I want or need in this situation. Yeah, and this is kind of predicted in Genesis 1. God says, I'll put enmity between you and the woman. And one of the things I've heard of that I sense is really dangerous, that I hear of happening around here, I'm not talking about any specific examples, I don't even think I know any of the hyper-specific examples, but is a temptation to view the other gender in a kind of vendor-consumerist way, right? Like, guys, if you send a text to a girl and ask for a nude picture, right? What is that saying, right? It's saying like, you are not a person, you are an item, right? I don't want to know you, I want porn, you know? And so it's like looking at the vending machine and pressing the button. Girls, if you receive a text like that, what that's saying is, the invitation is, the guy is saying, I don't value you as a person, I just want to treat you like an item, like an object. It's a really utilitarian view of relationships, right? I just want what I can get out of it. For the record, girls, if you get a text like that, right, a huge push for you is to find, ideal would be an older woman who's wise, but even if it's a peer, someone who thinks you are a person and values you because you're a person. Find someone like that to walk through something like that. And guys, I mean, that's really evil stuff. Please find someone, if this is something you wrestle with, to talk through and process. Why is it that you view women that way, and why don't you view them like people? Let's work on it. Let's talk about it. And so there's this utility in the back there. So red tape, your tribe. And that's the danger, and I see this kind of operating some too, right? And it comes out in academics as well, where maybe you, and all of us have those places where it's like, look, I stink, I'm terrible at science, so I'm gonna do my best, but I just gotta buckle down and do it. And there's some utility there, but when your entire academic career is really only about the numbers and not about the actual subject itself ever, that's really interesting, right? It's always about the utility, it's not about the topic, right? So never, ever, ever have I had somebody after the test come up, not to talk about the number, but to talk about the content in an interested way, right? Like, no one's ever come up and been like, man, I read that question and it really got me thinking, and da-da-da. They're only like, can I have like 2 more points? Come on. Dunkin' Donuts good. That wouldn't work. Barnes & Noble would, though. All right. So that's utility. City of Man, utility. The second thing I want to talk about in the City of Man, I think, is reciprocity. Reciprocity, and this is related to poem. Reciprocity means you kind of operate where if people are nice to me, cool, I'll treat you nice. If you're bad to me, I'm gonna mess you up. Story here, I'm in high school, I'm in a weightlifting class, and there's my friend Will, and we're doing medicine ball on this thing. I don't even know the name of that, a slant bench? Is that what it's called? I don't know. Nobody knows. I tried to Google it, nobody knows what it's called. The upward bench in the weight room, decline. It's called a decline bench. Pryor would know, he's ripped. So I'm using a medicine ball with this guy named Will, and so you come up, you catch the medicine ball, you go down, you come up, you toss it, I toss it back, okay? He loses count. I don't lose count. He loses count. And so he comes up and thinks he's done, and I throw it one more time, and I hit him in the face with like a 20-pound medicine ball. No hesitation, no hesitation. He stands up and punches me as hard as he can where the sun don't shine. So the transaction is like this. It's like, boom, pow! At which point I collapse and wonder if I will ever have children. And after that moment, he wasn't angry with me. He was like, well, we're even. I'm like, I don't think we are. So that's reciprocity, right? At its finest. If someone hurts you, there is a remainder that needs to be taken care of. If somebody hurts you, I gotta take care of this right now. Please don't do that to anyone ever, though, okay? I still remember it, it's jarring. And I think there's a blank check of reciprocity, right? So like, sometimes I think deep down, we get excited when people wrong us because we feel like, now, they're mine, right? So if somebody does something bad to you, you're like, I get to talk about this for the next 2 years, right? I get to subtly bring it, you remember when so-and-so did that to me? Cold, right? You have this blank check, you've been offended. You can do whatever you want to get back at them. Yeah, and so you kind of, basically what you're doing is you're saying like, I will be polite until someone messes with me, and then game over, I'm gonna go for it. So if somebody attacks me on like social media, if somebody says something bad to me in class, I'm gonna talk smack about them behind their back. I might talk smack to them to their face, I'm a little more bold. I'm gonna do things, I'm gonna mess with them in the dorm in some way, that kind of thing, right? Reciprocity. And essentially, we make enemies, and what we're saying when we make enemies, the reason we make enemies is because my favorite thing is me, and your favorite thing is you, right? And sometimes those things collide, and as long as you can generally respect my favorite thing, and I respect your favorite thing, then we'll be okay. But if you offend my favorite thing, which is me, we're gonna have problems, okay? So this is essentially what I would sum up as the city of man, right? So, Babel. Tower of Babel, the city of man. But I sense that people want something better than that. And one of the ways that this came out is, next slide please, the junior class speeches actually. This is kind of, I know like speeches kind of always feel a little forced and whatnot, but what's been hilarious as I've listened to more and more speeches, and I think there's a lot of sincerity behind some of them, is as the speeches come out, people consistently kind of mention these moments when we kind of transcended our tribe and came together. So a couple of, in the junior class speeches, a couple of times it came up, class challenges came up as this time when we usually just kind of hang out and ignore each other, and for this one time we were kind of together and working for the same goal, and it was really nice. I really liked it. It was cool. I'd kind of like to get to know you, maybe. And so I think that there's this push internally, you would actually like maybe not to just be trapped in your tribe, even as scary and terrifying as that is. So I want to talk about then the new order, which is the city of God. What does the new order look like? And this is mind-blowing stuff. This is the hardest thing maybe Jesus says. If we get the next slide. So this is what Jesus actually says about this. He says, you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. You should love people who love you and hate people who hate you. But I say to you, love your enemies. Love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who's in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than anybody else? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Okay, so what's he talking about here? Translation, basically, there's nothing remarkable about loving people who love you. Everyone does that, hopefully. That's not hard, right? When people say like, oh yeah, I mean, he doesn't like a lot of people, but he's really good to his friends. It's like, well, that's kind of like yeah. Hopefully you're good to your friends. That's easy. They're your friends. They like you, right? And so what Jesus is pushing on here is he's saying like, it's not actually, that is not something to brag about. That's bare minimum. Bad people like their friends. Hitler probably had friends he hung out with and liked them. And maybe they said that. Well, he's really bad to his enemies, but he really likes his friends. Yeah, so Jesus is pushing us to do a little more. Next slide. But who is my enemy? Who is my enemy? I mean, your enemy is the person who's talking smack about you, the person who stole your boyfriend or girlfriend, right? Your enemy is that person that like you see and you're like, and you don't want to sit beside them in class. Almost everybody has somebody popping up in their head at this point, I think. I don't have to like go into lots of detail about who your enemy is. I literally just saw someone go, you know who your enemy is, right? And so what Jesus is saying, and what's funny about what Jesus is saying is he's not saying this. He's not saying, you know what, be civil to your enemies. Make peace with your enemies. Coexist with your enemies. Practice self-care and expunge your enemies from your life. They are causing you stress. Stress is bad. He says, love your enemies. Like, love them, right? Like, you are all in. You are for that person. You would make sacrifices for that person. Some of us, we tend to operate like this, right? Like, let's say an enemy of ours. We'll be polite to our enemies, maybe in public, right? The minute they leave. I've literally seen students do this, where they're talking to somebody, and the minute the other person leaves, they look at their friend, they're like, oh my gosh, what can you believe? Ugh. And like 2 minutes ago, they had been like, oh yeah, nice to see you. That was not a girl voice, that was for everyone. Okay, love your enemies means that, like, I think a lot of us would be willing, like, yeah, we'll hold open the door for them. But what if you actually had to go out of your way for your enemy? Right? Like, to really set, like, you are in a group project with your enemy. The teacher's assigned it. And your enemy is dropping the ball, and they're asking you for a major favor, right? And it's going to be hard on you, and you're going to have to give things up for that person. That's the moment where loving your enemies is probably not going to happen, right? You might do it, but you're going to grumble the whole time. You're going to be happy that they're going further into your debt. The story is rising and rising. You've got more and more ammo to hate them. It's like the gun falling in Ben's hands at the last moment, you know? So this is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, love your enemies. I once heard a pastor say, sometimes this applies to marriage, right? You have months where like things are not going well, and the call for a husband and wife who are against each other is like, love your enemies, even now, right? Now, I think what might be coming out here is that Christianity, this is where like the rub is. Like, you can probably tell how much kind of you've grown in sanctification by how you treat your enemies. This is to me too, okay? Yeah, this is to me too. I definitely need all this. Like, so, in other words, the mark of a Christian might not be that you use hashtag blessed a lot, right? That might not be the, like, posting a scripture and putting hashtag blessed. It might not be the best indicator of whether you're a Christian or not, but how you treat your roommate that you hate, right? That might actually be it. Like, when somebody says, how's your spiritual life going? The answer might not be, I did this and this and this, and I read my Bible this many times. It might be how you love your roommate. It might be how you love the person in that tribe that you really don't like, and you don't like that tribe. That's what it might actually be, right? Okay, yeah. So, to reconsider, what this will force us to do is I think it forces you to reconsider a few things. So, how do you do your schoolwork not for yourself? So if life is red tape and you're just doing your schoolwork, then schoolwork is just for yourself. Do you know why school, some of you, is killing some of you? It's not actually the workload. Seriously. For some of you it is. For a lot of you, it's not the workload. We've actually toned back on a lot of the workload. It's not the workload. It's the fact that you are asking it to define you and give you your sense of worth. Of course that would kill you. It's not built to do that. If you ask school and work to make you valuable, to give you your sense of worth, you will hate it. You will hate it. It will not define you. You see what I'm saying? If you're asking for that paper to say who you are and to give you identity, you're going to have a horrible relationship with that piece of paper with learning. You're never going to be able to learn just because you want to learn. So what if you did that, not in the old way, but in the new order? What if you were motivated by learning out of like love? Right, like, man, I want to work to like love this subject. I want to work to do this because like I know that learning this will help me love my community better. And when I grow up and get this job, I can serve people better. So what if you did it not to validate yourself, but because you wanted to love other people? Be interesting. What if you did your social life not for yourself? Okay, so every time you're in the dining hall, you got to quickly retreat to your tribe and hide and hope that you've gotten in the place where you're safe. What if you went in and thought, like, who like really needs somebody to sit beside them right now, or an invitation or something? What if your social life was not about yourself? What if you said like, you know what, my friend's in that sporting event today, and I really should stay and study. But what if instead of staying and studying, you said, you know what, it would mean a lot to my friend if I went, and so I'm gonna go. For some of you, it's probably the reverse. I go to every sporting event, I need to stay and do my work. But what would that look like? And likewise, and one last thing about the workload, I really want to say this. If you watch Murray work, okay, Murray does not work to establish his identity. He doesn't do it. When Murray goes into a room to clean that room, which is awesome, when Murray goes into a room to clean the room, he does it because he loves us. He wants to do something that will make us happy and then celebrate it. He's not doing it like, if I do this, maybe my parents will love me. He knows, it'd be dark. He knows that we love him. So he does it, and then he comes back out and he's like, I cleaned my room! And we're like, yes! And we celebrate together and do a little dance, right? He does it because he loves his father, he loves his mother, and he wants to please them. What if we did work that way, right? What if you did work not because you want to earn God's love or something, you know he already loves you, and you show up and you're like, look at this painting I did, and God's like, awesome! That's amazing. We don't really think about God that way, right? I don't know why we don't. Like, yeah, I have trouble remembering that. Like, what if there's a day where like you have a good day as a student and I have a good day as a teacher, and God's like, man, that was awesome, good job. You know? I'm really delighting in you guys right now. It's cool. And how do you do your romance not for yourself, right? So like, if you are doing kind of that vendor-consumer model like we were talking about, dating, you're going to be asking, you're going to want to find someone who makes you happy. So the question you're going to ask is, will they make me happy? Will they make me happy? Will they meet my needs? Et cetera, et cetera. I think the real question is, do I want to be friends with them while they love other people? Do I want to be friends with them while they love other people? Can they be my partner in this task? One of the sweetest things about being married to Miss Barber is watching how well she loves other people. It's awesome. I know whenever I go into a new setting with Miss Barber, I'm unleashing a force for good into that new setting by walking in the room with her. That's amazing, right? What if we looked at it that way? And so just to reiterate that, this is what I'm saying. Spiritual life is kind of about your relationships in a lot of ways. The fruits of the Spirit are all relational. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. How can you see if you have the fruits of the Spirit? In your relationships with other people. That's where it comes out, right? It's not like a self-improvement project. It's how you relate to other people. It's this new order that I'm talking about. And next slide. Oh yeah, so back really briefly to that no vending machine thing. Let's work together and think about what it would look like instead of the old order and the new order. You know, I could come in and say, in terms of like sexting or something like that, I could come in and say like, which is partially, you know, could be true. You know, if you send pictures, nude pictures, that's actually breaking the law. It's kind of child pornography. Okay, I could say that, and some of you might go like, whoa, I didn't know that. I'm afraid now. I need to go do things out of fear and make sure I don't break the law. I don't want that, right? Like, I don't want you to do things because you're afraid. That sounds like the old order to me. That's still kind of just taking care of yourself. What I want is actually, I want people to do things because you love each other, you see each other as people, and you serve each other. And that is not something faculty can do. That is something that you guys have to do. That is something that like a group of students has to decide. Like, you know what, we're gonna like treat each other really well. Like a group of students, they say, you know what, I think we've done a bad job at bridging gaps between certain tribes. We're gonna stink and do that, right? I think that we don't treat women, or we don't think we treat men very well on this campus. I think we're gonna do that now. I could talk about this all day. It's not gonna happen unless students decide to do that themselves, right? And what it looks like at the end of the day, when people start treating each other like people, this is a small example, but when I was at seminary in grad school, there was kind of this communal hall, and my wife had a job online, and really there weren't a ton of people around, but a couple of my really close male friends saw Miss Barber sitting there alone, and they would sit with her a lot and work with her. Okay, there are two ways I could view that, right? There could be like suspicion level over here, like, oh, my good-looking male friends are hanging out with my wife. Don't know how I feel about that. Or there could be this thing over here where I'm like, man, I'm really pleased that guys I trust, who love me, and love my wife are willing to sit down and have a conversation, and because I know both of them view each other as people and not objects, and they're not like utility against each other, suddenly we've broken the gender war. There are like people who are from opposite genders having friendships and enjoying being together. It's amazing, right? Wow, yes, wow. Amazing. It's a beautiful thing. It's kind of like Mad Max. Don't watch Mad Max. Okay. Oh, it's awesome. All right. So this is, I can only find an old picture, but I was thinking, there are moments where I think the new order kind of breaks in to Stony Brook. And like I said, class challenges is one. The other one, I emailed out just a small group of teachers, and I said, tell me moments where you feel like you see kind of students doing these like amazing things to surprise you. And I got a few back. I'll keep them anonymous. I got a few back, and then of course, because she loves you so much, Ms. Ruggiero wrote like 8 pages worth of things. So these are some of the things that I got back as I emailed out. I heard my dorm girls are amazing at filling a need another girl might have or sharing what they have. And I've loved seeing how many of our students are genuinely interested in hearing about someone else's culture. I'm always blown away by final declamations, which I think reflects some pretty remarkable God-given dignity and talent. And after class night, it's always crazy to see the tremendous love and affection students pour out for each other. Next slide. Boarders become family with 20 to 30 strangers they're randomly thrown together to live with for 10 months who are going through the same stuff as they are. They help each other get through the daily routines, wake each other up when tempted to sleep, and they physically volunteer to cover their duties or use their own money on them. They literally become a family. Our student athletes are working for personal betterment, rarely the glory of a win. Next slide. Students carry backpacks and holding doors for those on crutches. A student letting his teacher know she had graded something incorrectly, which lowered the grade. What integrity. I got several emails about this. There are lots of students who frequently come up and said like, hey, you misgraded this and it hurt the student. That's awesome. But what does that say, right? That says like, grades don't define me. There's something bigger than grades. This is the first time I've done a Bible study. At our first meeting, I was humbled and awed by the openness of the young students. Love and acceptance flowed freely, and it was beautiful to witness. And then one last thing. This is Newsday, right? I don't know if you saw the article, but this was after the basketball game. Newsday, I mean, a news outlet wrote this about us. In the Newsday. Okay. Almost there. The Stony Brook School's fans were few in numbers, but mighty in presence. They displayed passion and pride, even as their beloved Bears fell behind and trailed in the fourth quarter. In the end, they displayed poignancy as well. Hickey called his players young men of character. They heard the school motto, and now they lived it. That's awesome. That's the new order breaking through, right? Like, you can build on that. That's a beginning, right? Next slide. I want to end on this story. Let's go one more time. I don't know if some of you have heard of Keisha Thomas. In 1996, in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, a group of Ku Klux Klan people came and met there, 16 Klan members. And there was a group of protesters, 100 protesters, who were outside yelling, arguing, at this Klansman. One of the Klan members somehow accidentally wandered into the group. And the mob, the protester yelled out, "There's one of them!" And somebody else said, "Get the Nazi!" And suddenly the dude is down. Right? He's got a Confederate flag t-shirt, he's wearing Nazi symbols on his body. He falls to the ground and they start beating on him. And at this moment, a high school senior named Keisha Thomas threw her body on top of him to protect him. Go to the next picture. She threw her body down. She sees this happening, and a guy who's devoted his life to hating her, right? Who is getting what he deserves. He's the enemy, he deserves it. She falls on top of him, begging people to leave him alone because she loves her enemy. And the photographer said this. Go to the next slide. Next slide. The photographer said she put herself at physical risk to protect someone who, in my opinion, would have not done the same from her. Who does that in this world? She didn't think about herself. She didn't think about the city of man. She didn't think about herself. She just did the right thing. How can you love something like that? You can love something like that if you serve a God who loved you when you were his enemy. If you know that you were once God's enemy, and he said, instead of giving you justice, what you deserve, I'm going to send Jesus. Jesus is going to die for you. I'm going to love your enemy. I'm going to fall on you. Right? And if you know that in your core, that you were an enemy of God, but he loved you just the same, then you can look at your enemies and say, you know what, I love you. I'm going to figure this thing out. I'm going to find a way to do what Jesus, I'm going to be perfect as my Father is perfect. I'm going to love you. So I want us to think about that in the coming week. I have to give a shout out before I end. A lot of this comes from my campus pastor, Britton Wood, who's an amazing guy. and showed me what this looked like, loving your enemies yourself. Let's pray together. Dear Father, we love you. We know we're doing good things here. We know we can do better. Help us to be perfect as you are perfect. Help us to love enemies because you have loved us. In Jesus' name, amen.